Hello, today we will be speaking about why poverty reduction initiatives are relatively ineffective. So what are poverty reduction strategies? So poverty reduction strategies and poverty reduction strategy papers describe a country's macroeconomic, structural, and social policies and programs to promote growth and reduce poverty, as well as associated external financing needs and major sources of financing. They are prepared by member countries along with civil society and development partners, such as the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund, and are updated every 3 years with annual progress reports. So some examples of poverty reduction strategies are the improvement of the management of natural resources, investment in agriculture, which provides more jobs in the primary section, diversifying the economy, improvement of the infrastructure, improving the electricity sector, developing social protection systems, and providing all people with access to education and improving internal efficiency of the education system.
In order to measure the effectiveness of addressing these components within the poverty reduction strategy, we have to look at the desired outcome. Inherently, a reduction in poverty and therefore a negative poverty rate is among the best indicators of an effective poverty reduction strategy. However, an ineffective strategy would result in either an increase or a lack of change in poverty in the years following the implementation of the strategy. We also have to look at the definition of poverty rates, which are the changes in the minimum amount of income deemed adequate in a particular country and are compiled based on the cost of essential resources that an average adult consumes and needs. We'll be using data compiled by the World Bank on poverty rates in order to establish our conclusion. Now, multiple countries implementing poverty reduction strategies have experienced said worsening of the poverty rates in the following years, wherein poverty rates should have arguably decreased. The most prominent example of said adverse effects can be seen in the countries Benin, Sudan, and Yemen by analyzing the poverty reduction strategies through the poverty reduction strategy papers published by the IMF, or the International Monetary Fund. Taking Yemen as the first example, the Republic of Yemen implemented the poverty reduction strategies progressively from 2003 to 2005. Yet 2005 saw Yemen's poverty rates increase by 15.1%, according to the World Bank, which is the exact opposite effect forecast by the poverty reduction strategy papers. Furthermore, Sudan published and implemented their poverty reduction strategy papers in October of 2013. Yet the following year saw an increase of 5% in the poverty rates, according to the World Bank. Lastly, Benin implemented the poverty reduction strategy, dubbed the Growth and Poverty Reduction Strategy, or the GPRS, also progressively from 2011 to 2015. And similarly to Yemen and Sudan, they experienced a 0.5% increase in poverty rates in 2015. These examples show not only that poverty reduction strategies can be ineffective, but could also lead to the opposite effect intended by the poverty reduction strategies.
So from our data, we can conclude that the poverty reduction strategies implemented in certain countries have been inefficient, as there was an inverse relationship between the application of the PRS and the poverty rates. We could consider the poverty reduction strategies to be effective under other aspects, such as social welfare, that are not calculated in the poverty rate, which is calculated purely on an economic basis. However, overall, we cannot consider these strategies effective enough in reducing poverty. Lastly, we must also consider ceteris paribus, other things being equal. Therefore, we must acknowledge that there could be other factors influencing the poverty rate, which have not been directly addressed by poverty reduction strategies. Therefore, we will analyze alternative solutions that have been proven to be more effective than the PRS in reducing poverty. So alternatively to the techniques implemented in the poverty reduction strategies, which include indirectly addressing the issue of poverty by tackling factors such as electricity, natural resources, or diversification, countries should address poverty more directly by focusing on job creation and the labor market, decreasing the unemployment rate, increasing minimum wage, and improving labor conditions and laws, as well as focusing on factors such as the price level in order to avoid inflation. Counteracting the effects of poverty reduction would be a more direct means of addressing poverty, which would be more effective in countries with harsh poverty rates, which need to be addressed directly in order to feel the effect in the short run.